Oh my god. Alright, so the only real goal today is just to apply some oil wash. I'm going to use just a skosh of black, a lot of umber, and I'm going to whittle it down with some mineral spirits. Oh my god, this thing is tight. Oh my god. Holy crap. This is the only thing about oil paints that I really hate. Jesus. That's right. Probably too thin. We'll see.
On my Space Marine kill team, I really got the bug for converting a small unit of individual characters, and so I was eager to expand this out into more factions. The first of these were a faction that has often been requested, but it's something that I've never covered on the channel. Until now, that is. I'm Pete the Wargamer, and in this video, I'll be showing you how to kit bash a Grey Knight kill team. I'll be giving this guide 4 dead animal bits out of 5. There are quite a few parts needed from other kits, a fair amount of cutting and trimming, and also some sculpting required. With the release of Primaris, the original Grey Knight models are looking a little small, so I was reluctant to use them as they were. I wanted something that was a little bulkier, but it needed to retain the general ornateness of the Grey Knights, as well as some of their signature aesthetics. So I turned to the Primaris Blade Guard, at least for some of my parts. Now, before I go on, I just want to give a big thank you to WhiteMetalGames, who helped me out with some of the parts that I needed for this video. Check out the description for a link to their site where you can pick up some discounted Games Workshop products. So, from this kit, I clipped away and cleaned up some of the parts required to build the legs and torso of just a single blade guard. The blade guard torso was much chunkier in its size, which would be great for my slightly upscale Grey Knights. But in itself, it lacked that iconic Grey Knight styling. I need something from an actual Grey Knight kit, but the regular power armor torsos from the Strike Squad wouldn't be big enough. So I turned to the much chunkier Grey Knight Paladins, whose Terminator armor was much better proportioned against the new legs, and had all the Grey Knight iconography and detailing that I wanted. It also had the all-important Psychic Hood, something that is important for amplifying the Grey Knight's psychic abilities. Attaching these two components together would be tricky though, and would require the entire removal of the blade guards from the torso, which is why I decided to build just the one team member for the time being. I wanted to make sure that this would actually work before I ruined a whole squad of blade guard. I began the removal by making a diagonal cut along each side of the chest armor, leaving the stomach area attached to the legs. These two inwardly sloping cuts were then joined by a horizontal cut, which freed the upper torso from the midrib and the legs. This same cutting technique was then repeated on the rear half of the torso, so I was just left with the lower back attached to the legs. Now that the blade guard upper torso had been removed, I had a much better idea of how I would go about attaching the assembled Grey Knight Paladin torso. The Paladin torso already had a rounded socket, so it made the most sense for me to round out the top of the blade guard legs so that it fit inside a bit. After trying fitting the parts together, I could see that the small remnants of armor around the stomach and lower back needed to be cut back. During this process, I made several comparisons against the torso to ensure that the cuts that I was making were being done in the correct locations and in the correct amounts. As each of the torsos and legs are slightly different, it's difficult to get an exact idea of what cut should be made here. For example, with these particular legs, a small pouch at the back of the waist was getting in the way, so it needed to be removed. Once it had been cut away and smooth, the torso fit a lot better. It did leave a small hole behind in the plastic, but this will be covered over later, and so it wasn't a problem. Additional cuts were also needed to the legs. I wouldn't be attaching the regular bolt pistol holster, so some of the protruding tabs could be removed too. These were smoothed flat and checked by dry fitting the two halves of the legs together. With all of the adjustments the torso and legs made, I began by separately assembling the legs and torso before putting them together, resulting in the basis of my blade knight. My first team member was Alaric, who I armed with a demon hammer in order to take full advantage of that extra attack generated by his combat specialism. For this, I needed an arm that would fit the scale of the legs and torso. I chose an Assault Intercessor pistol arm and the Demon Hammer component from the Grey Knight Terminator kit. I chose this one specifically because it was held in a single hand, rather than the two-handed option from the regular Striker Squad kit. The Primus arm was also holding something in its hand though, so this needed to be cut away at the wrist first. Once removed, I then cut away any remaining parts of the hand and buttoned it at the wrist. Again, it's best practice here to make frequent comparisons against the parts to ensure that they will fit properly. I then glued the arm to the torso and then glued the hand to the arm. For the left arm, I used another one of the Assault Intercessors and grabbed myself a Striker Squad arm with a mounted Stormbolter as well. As Grey Knight Stormbolters are attached at the wrist, I would also need a left hand too, so I opted to attach the 7 head-carrying hand from the Terminator set. Like before, I removed the hand from the arm and then trimmed things back a little until I was happy with how the hand was fitting against the wrist. But I didn't glue anything just yet, because first I needed to work on the Stormbolter. I first clipped away the forearm mounted weapon from the Grey Knight's arm and then shaved away any remaining bits. Following this, I then found that the concave nature of the back brace would make attaching the weapon tricky, so the 2 raised points at either end were flattened out before gluing everything together, completing the main structure of the model. Now at this stage in the build, I had a mini dilemma. I'd actually changed my mind about the torso. I found that the lack of a power pack resulted in the armor looking too much like Terminator armor rather than just a bulkier take on regular power armor. The problem was I now had to remove the bench from the back of the torso in order to make room for the pack, something that would have been much easier to do earlier on in the build. So I set about making the changes, starting out with my clippers to remove the bulk of the plastic and then shade everything smooth with a knife until I was able to glue a Grey Knight power pack into place. This was then followed by the head and shoulder pads, all of which were taken from the Grey Knight Striker Squad kit. The blade guard scabbard was the next thing to tackle. Due to the new torso, the regular components wouldn't fit, so a little clipping and bending was required for it to sit properly. I then finished it off by attaching the sword's hilt. The small hole at the back of the model was then patched up with a pouch before gluing on a tilt shield found in the Grey Knight Terminator's kit. At this point, the model was pretty much completed, but I still had a little detail to add. In a lot of the Space Marine and Grey Knight artwork, the models are practically covered in purity seals and parchment, and this is something that I wanted to recreate. I cut out and mixed a small amount of green stuff and rolled it out into a thin sausage. I then grabbed some foil and lightly coated it with Vaseline, creating a smooth, pliable surface to work on. The green stuff was added to the foil, and I then rolled the sausage flat. Because I had only greased the foil, the flattened green stuff was now stuck to the roller. While the green stuff was here, I then added a small series of nicks and tears to the edges to create that disheveled look. Once that was done, I gave the green stuff an hour or so to firm up a little. Now the putty wasn't as soft, I could carefully peel it away from the roller before supergluing it to the hammer. As the green stuff was still slightly malleable, I could wrap it around the handle, completing the look. This process was then repeated a few times, first at the front of the Grey Knight's tabard, and then around the scabbard. To finish these off, I then glued some purity seals to the tops of them. Remember to use superglue here though, because plastic glue won't work. And with that, the first dance model was done, and I could move on to working on the remaining 4 team members. For these, I decided to batch the torsos and legs together in a single step, which would form the basis of each model. I began by removing the Blade Guard and Grey Knight Terminator torsos from their sprues, before cutting away the Blade Guard torsos and Grey Knight vents and gluing everything together, leaving me with the bodies that I'll be using for the next 4 fighters. The second squad member to build was the Zealot, Leonatos. To benefit from that extra attack and strength of the charge, I decided to arm him with a pair of falchions, giving him another bonus attack as well as some decent AP damage. Like with Alaric, I began with a pair of the Primus arms, specifically those sword-carrying Blade Guard arms, and 2 falchion hands from the Grey Knight Strike Squad set. For both of these arms, I removed the hands and trimmed things back to create a flat joint, just like I did before. However, in addition to this, I also shaved away the Indomitus symbol from the right arm. The vambrace on the left arm was also flattened out to make room for a Stormbolter, which again was removed from the Grey Knight Strike Squad kit. With the arms, hands, and bolter prepped, they were all glued together and attached to the torso. As I used Blade Guard arms here, my regular Strike Squad shoulder pads wouldn't be big enough to fit over the enlarged shoulders. Fortunately, the Grey Knight Terminator pads work perfectly here, so a couple of these were attached as well as a power pack. I then selected a helmetless head from the Strike Squad set, which featured a suitably zealous expression, and glued this into place. Following this, I attached a scabbard. Again, modifications were required to get this to fit properly against that new torso. The Grey Knights already have a zealous devotion to their task, so enhancing this on a model was a little tricky. Ultimately, I chose to tackle this with the addition of lots of purity seals and a very large toe. This particular piece was sourced from one of the Terminator banner poles. I clipped away the knife that doubled as a stand. With a little trimming, I now had a book that could be glued to the Grey Knight's waist. This was followed up with another pouch to the back, again to cover up any damage, and another tilt shield was also added. Finally, using that same green stuff method that I'd used around the Demon Hammer, I created a wrap of parchment around Leonatus' wrist, followed by another purity seal superglued to the green stuff wrap. The next specialist was Calidus, the demolition specialist armed with an incinerator. Getting this immolating weapon into the hand of a slightly larger scale arm was solved with a Hellblaster plasma gun. To join these 2 parts together, I began by sawing away the rear part of the plasma gun along with the rail that runs across the top. This left me with the arm, the grip, the receiver, and the rail. I continued by sawing away the rear part of the incinerator, trimming the cut afterwards to ensure that I had a good flat surface. With this done, the Hellblaster arm was then glued to the remnants of the incinerator before everything was glued to one of the head torsos. Matching up a left hand to be holding the incinerator would have been a little tricky, so I ultimately decided to cheat and go for a pointed hand, matching the load position of the weapon. The arm was taken from the Assault Interceptor's kit in order to match the sizing of the right arm. The hand was then removed before being replaced with a pointing hand from the Strike Squad. This completed arm was then glued to the body, followed by some regular power arm shoulder pads, and finally the power pack. To emphasize demolition specialism of this model, I began with a servo skull taken from the Terminator kit. When paired up with a pointing arm, this gave the appearance that Calidus was ordering the skull to assess a particular target or scout a certain area. This was glued to the left side of the torso, taking advantage of as many contact points as possible to ensure a strong fit. In a similar vein to the servo skull, I grabbed myself the Terminator off the carry rack and clipped away one of the sensors. With a little trimming, this was then glued into place just behind Calidus's right shoulder and was angled to face in the pointing direction. Combined with the servo skull, these helped to sell the model's additional range specialisms. With these in place, all that was left to do was to attach the sword sheath, a Grey Knight head facing to the left to match the further model, and finally a scattering of purity seals. As I was building a 5-man team and the rules only allowed for 4 specialists, Makarov would fill in as the regular Grey Knight. Again, a pair of falchions were chosen for this loadout, and I followed the same hand swap steps that I had adopted for the Anatos. Another Stormbolter was relinquished and attached to the Blade Guard arm before they were attached to the torso. 2 more Terminator shoulder pads were then used before attaching the power pack. Finally, a Grey Knight's head was used and extra items of equipment were glued about Makarov's belt. This just left me with one more model to tackle, which was of course Isaiah, the leader of the Grey Knight kill team. So far, I hadn't really indicated the Grey Knight's psychic abilities, but this seemed like a great way to single out the squad's leader. I had this idea to create the appearance of levitating rocks lifting up from the base, and so to match this, I wanted the left arm to be raised. This would be achieved with a chainsword carrying assault intercessor arm and a hand from the strike squad. I clipped away the chainsword carrying hand from the arm and cut back the remnants to leave me with a flat wrist joint. This was followed by some small trims to the new hand to help ensure the position would look natural. The hand was then glued to the wrist, and then the arm was attached to the final torso. However, I had a problem with the shoulder size. As I had planned to use a Blade Guard right arm, this left arm shoulder profile would look unbalanced against it. Fortunately, the Blade Guard kit comes with a few of these shoulder pad inners that, when glued to the left shoulder, sufficiently bulked up to the desired size. This left arm was then finished off with its Stormbolter, which left me with this psychic ability building limits. For the right arm, I employed the usual Blade Guard arm and, you guessed it, falchion combination, paying particular attention once more to remove that Indomitus symbol. Once done, everything was glued together, quickly followed by some slightly more ornate Terminator pads added the power pack. To help further emphasize Isaiah's rank, I attached another book to the waist along with some of the more slightly ornate purity seals. All there was left to do then was to pick a head. I chose a bare Terminator head for this task. I found that its grimaced face and cable-bedecked coif were the perfect complement to the psychic power that he was channeling. This was glued into place, completing the model and the team. All that was needed to be done was to base and paint, which left me with this. And here we have the completed 5-man Grey Knight kill team: Elric, Leonatus, Calidus, Makarov, and Isaiah. Compared to my Raptors kill team, getting these specialisms converted and onto the miniatures were a little trickier, but I'm happy with the results, and I think I've managed to keep things on theme for the Grey Knights. The rescaling here was also a bit of a gamble. I wasn't sure if the Blade Guard legs would look odd against the Grey Knight detailing, or if they'd look too big. But these guys are still short of their requirements while still being a little better proportion, so I'm staying true to the law here. I was also worried about them looking too much like Terminators, but I think with the 32mm base size and the power packs, that helps to offset the use of the chunky Terminator torsos and the shoulders. Now, if you enjoyed this video and would like to see me tackle more kill teams, be sure to leave me a like and your suggestions for other factions you would like to see me tackle. I'll also be putting together a basing guide for these Demon World bases very soon as well. Finally, a big thank you once again to WhiteMetalGames for helping me out with a few of the kits that I use in this video. Check out the description for a link to that site where you can pick up some discounted Games Workshop product.
listeners. I'm Barbara Morgan, and you're listening to Austin Film Festival's On Story. This week on Story, we'll hear from writer-director Neil Jordan, who gave us the cinematic classics The Crying Game, Michael Collins, and Interview with a Vampire. Neil Jordan is an Irish film director, screenwriter, novelist, and short story writer who won an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay for The Crying Game. Most recently, he wrote and directed 2018's Greta, which stars Chloe Grace Moretz, as well as the television series Riviera. Producer-director Barry Joseph spoke with Jordan at the Austin Film Festival on a panel about his career as a filmmaker. Clips of Mona Lisa, courtesy of Handmade Films. Clips of The Crying Game, courtesy of Palace Pictures. Clips of Interview with the Vampire, courtesy of Geffen Pictures.
You studied history and English literature, but I'm sure that you still had the cinema in mind, somewhere in the deep background.
I didn't know what to do, really, but I went to... Okay, so when you grew up in Dublin, if you come from a Catholic background, you go to a place called University College Dublin, which is where James Joyce went to, you know. If you are there's a bit of English in your background, you went to a place called Trinity College, which was much more like Oxford and kind of hallowed halls and beautiful grounds and all that sort of stuff. So I went to UCD and I studied history and English. I don't know why. I always wanted to write. I don't know why I studied history. It was one of the few subjects that interested me. But I met kind of a soulmate there, a guy called Jim Sheridan. Now, you know Jim's movies, don't you?
Yes, brilliant.
Okay. So myself and Jim, we were in college together. We started this drama group, yeah? We basically took over the college drama department, you know, in a kind of a coup. And so we put on these plays. I was mainly writing them. He was directing them. He was a brilliant director of actors, actually. One of the best I've ever come across. But so we were kind of doing them together, and we had this impossible dream to make movies, you know, that kind of thing. And again, you thought it was absolutely impossible, you know, because they weren't made by kids like us. They weren't made by Irish people in particular, you know, that kind of thing. So it was odd that it came to pass. Jim started making films. I started making, you know, it was weird.
And did you intern on Excalibur with Borman?
I did, yeah.
I love that movie, by the way. I've watched it many times. I mean, it's one of the most magnificent visual experiences you could ever have in a cinema. Yeah. And I was thinking, obviously, you'd already started writing by then. I
wrote a collection of short stories. They were called Night in Tunisia and other stories, and John read the collection. I met John Borman, you know, this English guy, you know. And of course, I'd seen Point Blank, and I'd seen Helen Pacific, and I'd seen Deliverance, which is a masterpiece, extraordinary film, you know.
Masterpiece.
So I meet this man, you know, incredibly dynamic, mesmeric kind of guy.
Borman, one of the great filmmakers, and you're meeting him right at the height of his career. Were you nervous writing for him, or you know, did he give you any guidance?
I mean, you have to realize I came from a city of writers. You know, Dublin, Ireland, Dublin in particular is a city of writers. You know, James Joyce, Van O'Brien, Samuel Beckett, all of whom left, except poor old Van O'Brien, who stayed and drank himself to death. You know, the vocation was a writer's vocation. If you had any kind of urge towards telling stories or narrative, you know, that was regarded as a great dream. You know, for me to work with John and for me to actually be thinking of stories that actually don't depend on words, you know, that can be told through images and dramatic situations. It was an extraordinary freedom, you know. It kind of blew my mind, really, you know. So I got seduced, really, by not so much by the glamour of cinema, but by the kind of weird poetry that you can invent through it that you wouldn't be able to express on a page, you know. Do you understand what I mean? So
when you were on set with him, was there anything that you took away that you felt like,
we wrote the script and he couldn't get it going. And then he said, look, I'm making this other film. It's called Excalibur. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, and he had a huge 500-page script or something. He said, look, I'd like you to work with me on this, you know. So I went through the last draft of the script with John, you know, and we began to, you know, I don't know what I was doing really. Maybe I was kind of editing it or yeah, and talking through the scenes, and we were rewriting all the scenes together. And around the same time, the first George Lucas' Star Wars came out, you know. Now, Excalibur is a huge story, you know, the whole Arthurian legend. John was trying to encompass in one story, you know. And I remember going to see Star Wars, and I came back and said, John, there's a way we can get all this down to this little nut, you know, this beautiful kind of Joseph Campbell-like drama, you know. And he says, oh, sorry, I'm just going off to shoot it, he said. And I was saying, but you can't, we haven't finished the script yet. You know, and so he went off and he started shooting it, and then he said to me, he wanted somebody to have there to bounce ideas off, you know? And I said, oh, great, I'd love to do that. And I said, but I've never been on a movie set, what'll I do? And I said, well, why don't I try and make a documentary on you making the film? You know? So he he carved off a little bit of the budget, you know? Right. And I got a 3-man crew. It was the first time I'd ever came close to a camera, you know? A 60mm camera. You know, a guy called Seamus DC, who ended up shooting subsequent movies for John. So as John was shooting this enormous thing, you know, I was wandering around, you know, shooting this legend, you know what I mean? And there was a strange symbiosis there, because Merlin was a very big figure in Excalibur, as you know. And, you know, John seemed to me to be like this strange Merlin figure, making these kind of strange worlds and fantasies appear. So
Borman was your Merlin. That's fantastic.
Well, he was, actually. He was a very inspirational man.
I would imagine.
I mean, it was a big film at the time. And, I mean, Liam Neeson was in it, Gabriel Byrne, Helen Mirren. There's a lot of talent that, you know, John set in motion, really, through that movie.
Talk to me about your inspiration for your first film, for Angel, and why maybe you sat down to write a movie.
I used to play a band, you know, and make money for my kids and all that. And at the time, there was this horrible, the north of Ireland and the sectarian killing and the whole IRA war, loyalist war had begun in the north of Ireland. I used to travel up and down in this van. We used to play up in Belfast and different places, and Dundalk and Newry, and it always seemed that musicians were immune to the whatever conflict was going on, you know, because they were giving escape and pleasure. And a show band, what's called a show band, it's kind of a dance band here, you know, were stopped at the border and they were taken out by a bunch of gunmen. I think they were loyalist gunmen, actually, with the collusion of some elements of the security forces, and they were shot or killed. You know.
Oh my God.
And it was quite shocking. So I didn't write about that event, you know, but I wrote a script, Angel, yeah. I suppose I took as a point blank, as a kind of a template, you know, maybe a bit of John's Point Blank, you know, with Lee Marvin, this kind of really bare bones, almost isolated thriller, you know. For me, it was a movie about how the center character was a saxophone player, yeah. And at the time, I used to play a bit of the saxophone. And he observes this killing, and he gets seduced by a gun, and he carries a gun in a saxophone case, and, you know, and it became this kind of examination of the attraction of violence, really, you know. And I wrote the script, and I showed it to John, and he liked it, and he said, oh, he thought he might be able to set it up, and he spoke to some American people he knew, and nothing worked, and they were saying, well, why don't you set it in America, and all this sort of stuff. And in the meantime, Channel 4 had set up, you know, Channel 4, you know, they were trying to make it, they set up a thing called Film on 4, you know, they were trying to expand the kind of remit of British dramatic television. There was a chap there called David Rose who read my script, and he loved it, yeah, and he said they wanted to make it, yeah. So I went over to meet them, and I said, look, I'd like to direct it myself if you want to make this film, you have to take me on as a director. And they said, no, you've not done anything. And I said, well, I did this little documentary on John Woman. And they said, oh, no. And I said, and John has actually agreed to produce the film, you know. So they said, oh, that makes a difference. I said, John, look, these people are interested in making the film, you know. And so this happened, let's put it that way, you know. So I ended up making my first movie, which was kind of a terrifying experience, you know. I mean, believe me, I knew nothing. I didn't know anything about complementary close-ups. I didn't know anything about the language of film editing. I just had a series of quite dynamic pictures in my head, you know, that I wanted to realize and tell the story through. And I was helped to have a great cameraman, Chris Mangaze, you know. It was interesting. I remember saying because Chris was from the Ken Loach documentary tradition, you know, and I really wanted to kind of pull every social context imaginable from the story I was telling. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes,
I didn't want it to become a agitprop thing. I didn't want any explanations for the attraction or the kind of pit of violence the central character was falling into, you know. So I kind of try to remove all those elements. And I remember saying to Chris, look, basically, we're making a musical gone horribly wrong, you know.
And you wanted it to be more sudden and impactful too.
Yeah, I think so. I can tell you, sure, I didn't know what I wanted. I just wanted to tell the story, but it ended up being we made this lovely movie, and they showed it in the market in Cannes. People didn't know what they saw initially, but then critics began to like it.
And tell me a little bit about Mona Lisa, about starting that process.
Mona Lisa, well, when I was making Company Wolves with my producer, Stephen Woolley, we were talking about the idea of making a London crime drama, you know, and because then London is a city that's always fascinated me, but I've never seen, at the time, I hadn't seen any really cinematic kind of visual things coming out of it, apart from a movie I think it was made by Robert Rossen called Night in the City. It was about
right. Yes, great movie.
Yeah, great actually. And Stephen was talking about doing this crime story, and there was a selection of newspaper articles about a pimp who was claiming that he was trying to rescue these girls from lives of, you know, perdition and street prostitution and all that. So as I was making Company Wolves, I spoke with David Leland, a very great writer, and David wrote a version of this story. Again, it was too gritty, you know, it was harsh, hard, it was David's kind of thing. When I finished it, I read it, he had been quite influenced, I think, by a movie that Paul Schrader made called, what was it about? It was about prostitution, where the kind of pornographic world. I don't know if you remember that movie. Anyway, I remember reading it and saying, David, this is great, but it's not what I meant at all, you know, kind of thing. I was trying to make a movie about how men misunderstand women, you know, the totality of that experience, that feeling, you know. And I met Bob Hoskins, and Bob was kind of interested in playing the part, you know, but again, he thought it was too harsh. So I took the script and I rewrote it with Bob in mind, you know, Bob Hoskins in mind. So it became Mona Lisa, that, you know.
You like her, Jack?
Of course I like her.
Yeah, but you like her in a special way. In the songs.
What songs?
Well, I've sold myself for a couple of...
She needs me, George.
You needed me to get her.
You ever need someone?
All the time.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the movie, that no matter what movie you make, no matter where you travel, you will always have people ask you about the Crying Game. The movie's so brilliant. It's a classic, and it sort of defines so many really interesting reveals. You know, you won an Academy Award for it. Congratulations. I think that probably still feels good to this day. And yeah, I mean, it does feel good, don't you think? I mean, being rewarded.
Yeah, absolutely. It's extraordinary. I mean, I never thought I would be in that world.
Tell us a little bit about actually sitting down to write and consider and think about the Crying Game.
I began writing the Crying Game. I remember talking to Stephen Woolley, actually, saying I had this story in my mind about somebody who commits a killing, a sectarian killing, you know, like a political assassination, and out of a sense of guilt tracks down this soldier, this individual's wife, yeah, in London, you know. And I began writing it, and every time I came to London, it stopped, you know, it just became uninteresting somehow, you know. So there was a kind of almost a homoerotic content to it, dynamics, you know, kind of to the relationship between the IRA guy and the soldier he captured. Because we're living in such intense closeness together, you know, and it was almost like a bondage situation, you know, master and slave kind of thing, you know. And then one day I thought, oh, okay, what if a woman is actually a man, you know? Suddenly the story became much more interesting.
Anything, son?
No way. You said anything, Dad? A girl has to draw the line somewhere.
Gotta change it to a man.
Why? It's a secret. Would you like me better that way, Jimmy?
Yes.
And you wouldn't leave me? You promise?
I promise.
Come on then.
And the scenes of captivity in the first third of the movie, you know, became, you know, full of all these wonderful senses of foreboding and all this subtext and all that sort of stuff. So it became The Crying Game, but it took me about, I think I was playing around with the beginning of the screenplay for about 3 years before I reached that moment. So I was making a film about race, you know. The character Forrest Whitaker plays, he's a black soldier in the north of Ireland. Now, there were many Caribbean soldiers, black Caribbean extraction mainly, you know. When they appeared in Catholic and nationalist areas, you know, they were abused with the most racist epithets you ever could find, you know. They really were, because they were foreign in two ways. They were members of a foreign occupying force, you know, and they were also, you know, racially foreign as well, you know. So there were all these kind of weird ironies in that situation. And so, I mean, the film was really about all sorts of preconceptions we have of others, really, you know. And, you know, when it became a film about gender and sexuality as well, it wrote itself, really, because, you know, all that germ was there in the first third of what I'd written.
Why did you sting me, Mr. Scorpion? For now we both will drown. Scorpion replies, I can't help it. It's in my nature. So what's that supposed to mean? Means what it says. A scorpion does what it's in its nature. Take off the hood, man. Why? Because you're kind. And it's in your nature.
Once I explored those issues of gender and identity and all that sort of stuff, the film wrote itself, and it was like it was waiting to be written in a way, you know.
I wanted to jump to Interview with a Vampire. Obviously, The Crying Game has come out. I think that you received the opportunity for it to be after The Crying Game had come out, correct?
Yeah.
And obviously, when you make a groundbreaking film like that, an award-winning film like that, everybody now is coming to you and throwing everything at you.
The Crying Game, I didn't know what they were sending me, but obviously it was a big hit, you know, and it was a big, for a period, you're the kind of the talent du jour in Los Angeles, you know. And eventually David Geffen sent me Interview with the Vampire, yeah?
Yeah.
You know, so I went through Anne's script and I began to reintroduce a lot of elements from the novel that she felt perhaps weren't necessary for a cinematic experience. Tom, when I just read it, I met Tom and I thought, wow, this could be amazing, you know. Cast Tom and all hell broke loose, really. You know? But anyway, it was great. It was good. It was good to make.
He did do a remarkable job.
Yeah, if you give Tom Cruise a challenge, he will rise to it, you know. He will.
Do you find yourself dedicated to a theme throughout? And obviously you had some incredible themes in The Crying Game. You're influenced by these themes. Do you feel like you're a slave sometimes to a theme as you're writing a film?
There's always several people inside you, isn't there, you know? I mean, people who look at my movies would say, oh, there's the gothic kind of dude there. You know, there's a guy who did Interview with the Vampire, did Byzantium, another vampire movie I made, did Greta, did Company of Wolves, then there's the guy who did Michael Collins, The Crying Game, you know, you know, they'd say there's a kind of a realistic political animal there, and there's a kind of a fantasist or something, you know. I think there's several people in all of us, isn't there, really? You know, I think there's definitely two inside of me, you know. I mean, the great thing about fantasy, the great thing about gothic stuff, gothic material, the great thing about horror is you can create exactly the images you want, you know what I mean? And I really, you know, because you're building worlds, you have to build the sets, you have to build everything, the light, you know, all that sort of stuff. Some of the latest renditions of independent movies I find really upsetting because people kind of seem to think it's enough just to have a camera on the street, you know, the kind of thing, you know, handheld camera on a street corner with actors talking or, you know, doing a thing. That to me is not cinema, it's not satisfying enough, you know.
Truly.
So that's probably why, you know, horror is having a great moment, has been in the last few years, really, you know.
Any advice on writing unlikable characters?
I mean, I love to choose a character that has no redeeming features whatsoever. It's rather wonderful to do that, isn't it? And to see some element of humanity in a character that most people would reject, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, The Butcher Boy was about a kid who became a serial killer, basically, you know. Well, not quite a serial killer, but he became what he called himself, a chopper up, you know. When I was doing the interview, the end of the affair, Stephen Ray, who's kind of a muse of mine in a strange way, there were two characters. One was the lover, played by Ray Fiennes, who was the romantic role, you know, had the voice of everything and all that sort of stuff. The other was the cuckolded husband, you know. And when I gave the screenplay to Stephen initially, Stephen said, well, I don't want to play this guy. I want to play everybody wants to play the lover. You know, everyone wants to play the desirable sex object, you know, kind of thing. I said, okay. And then I said, Stephen, it's much more interesting if somebody as apparently attractive as you plays this, you know, this sad man who cannot give his wife sexual pleasure, you know. And he thought about it, and it was a most unforgiving role, but he made something extraordinary of it, actually, you know. And sometimes they're the most interesting parts, I think, you know.
On Story is brought to you in part by the Alice Kleberg Reynolds Foundation, a Texas family providing innovative funding since 1979. This project is supported in part by the Cultural Arts Division of the City of Austin Economic Development Department, the Texas Commission on the Arts, the U.S. Institute of Museum and Library Services, Texas Library and Archives Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts, on the web at arts.gov. Support for On Story comes from Bogle Family Vineyards, 6th-generation farmers and 3rd-generation winemakers, creating sustainably grown wines that are a reflection of the Bogle family values since 1968. This show is produced by myself, Barbara Morgan. Our associate producers are Jamal Knox and Colin Heyer. Our editors are Jamal Knox and Travis Nealon. Music is by Brian Ramos. Production assistance comes from SoundLab Inc., Travis Kennedy Sound, and KUT 90.5 in Austin. Go to austinfilmfestival.com to find out more about Austin Film Festival and Conference.
Hello, and welcome to the Scripts and Scribes live stream podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Fukunaga. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us, as always. Our guest next Saturday is Stargate and Utopia Falls writer, producer, showrunner Joseph Malazzi. That's next Saturday, July 24th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 Eastern. But today we've got on a lit manager who is a fellow graduate of USC's Film School. She was formerly the VP of Development at Luc Besson's studio, Europa Corp, head of development at Rock, Paper, Scissors, executive producer at prominent social media company Arsenic TV, and co-produced films such as The Backup Plan for CBS and Hope Springs for Mandate. To catch my breath here, she's also worked as an exec at Allison Schirmer Productions at Lionsgate and worked on films such as The Pursuit of Happiness, The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, Knowing, The Great Invaders, and others. After beginning her career at Escape Artists at Sony, she's currently a lit manager and producer at Heroes and Villains. She is Chris Coggins. Welcome to the podcast. Chris, I can catch my breath now. It's great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I sound really so nice.
No, you had so many things. I'm sure I left things out, but I would pass out if I kept going and going and going. So thank you for coming on the podcast today. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. It's so nice to be here.
Before we get started in talking all about your career and everything, I wanted to let the audience members know that if you're in the live stream, you have questions for Chris about representation, development, production, whatever, drop them in the chat below and we'll get to them as soon as we can. But now, I first wanted to get down to the bottom of it, just right at the beginning, start off with the beginning of your career. How did you get your start in the industry? And then also, how did you end up as a lit rep at Heroes and Villains? Because you have a wide range of experience, both on the buying side, the selling side, the production side, development, representation, everywhere along the line. So,
my spiel? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, after I was a senior at USC in film school, which I loved right on. And a friend of mine, Megan, actually had an internship with Escape Artists, and it was unpaid, and she found another internship that was paid, so she was going to go do that one instead. And so she asked me if I wanted it. And so I came in to interview, and they gave me the internship. So I was an intern as a escape artist for part of junior and most of senior year. And then after I graduated, they hired me. So, and then I just moved up and up and up as I worked there in development and production. What was the second part of the question?
Well, how did you go from working as, that escape artist all the way, to being where you are now?
To being a manager?
Yeah.
So I learned a lot as a escape artist. I had a really good time there. Worked on a bunch of movies. Had a lot of really great experiences with a lot of really great people. Those guys really taught me, how to read a script, how to break it down, how to, read a schedule and a budget, and to really hone my taste. So that was really good. That was great. And then working for Allie, she really taught me how to sell. She really taught me how to present a project, refined my taste even more. She was a very special person. And she taught me how to present something to the studio, how to sell something, which was great. And then at Rock Paper, they were starting up the division when I was there, and it was mostly doing the same thing that I'd done, development and production. But what I really got to learn there it's also a editing studio, and they had a design studio and a production studio. So I got to learn all kinds of stuff there, like what's smoke and what's flame, and how to present even though I didn't present anything in the marketing side, I got to watch them as they worked with clients and put together like these amazing campaigns, and it was really interesting. And Angus was great. He's a award-winning editor, and that's my favorite part of the process is getting into the booth and like really putting everything together. And then at EuropaCorp, I really liked it there because I liked my coworkers were very lovely, but it was a very specific mandate. It was movies that had to be $5 to $50 million in budget. They had to be sci-fi, action, crime, thriller, maybe drama if it was the right thing. And they had to have European or EU passport directors to take advantage of the tax credits and rebates there. So it was a very specific mandate, which I really liked. It was just really easy to know what a EuropaCorp movie was and what it wasn't. And then after that, Arsenic was fun because I didn't really know anything about Snapchat and social media.
Right.
And I really didn't know. And our budgets were really small. And I kind of liked that challenge. I had produced like a couple of music videos and PSAs just for people or for fun or for whatever it was on super low budgets. And a short film too that my friend on the top and I made we tried to make it for $0. Everybody donated. My mom was crafty. Like, it's great. So I kind of like that at Arsenic is this challenge of how do you make this fun, interesting content that people want to engage with on a really small budget. So that was really interesting. But I was itching to get back into working with a team, and a couple of management companies had approached me over the years to say like, we think you'd be a good manager. And I was just like, I don't really know what that is, and that's not what I do. And I didn't think I'd be good at it. But then I was talking to two, and it's an entrepreneurial kind of job. It uses my same skills from development and production, and it's the same, people. It's just talking to executives and producers and agents in a different way. So, and I have a high adaptability quotient, I think. So I thought maybe I could do this. So I was talking to two companies, and then I called up my friend Knightdale, who's the founder of Heroes and Villains, and he started a company with Marcus and Dick almost 15 years ago, I think, and we had known each other since we were both assistants. I think he was at ICM on mandate, and I was at Escape Artists. And he's like my brother, and I was like, hey, Mikhail, tell me the truth. Do you think I'd be good at this job? And he said, I think you'd be really good at it. I think you've already been doing it. You just didn't realize you were. But don't go anywhere else. Come here. We love you. We'll teach you what you don't know. We'll help you find clients. And, let's go have fun and work hard and play hard. And I was a little nervous because he's such a good friend. And if it didn't work out, I didn't want that to ruin our friendship. And he said, oh, you're so sweet. It won't. And he was right. And 4 years later, I'm really very happy with where I am. I do love my colleagues and my coworkers. They're lovely, wonderful people who really do want to make good product, and they're just very good humans. So I'm very lucky.
I do have a few more questions for you, but there's one from the chat that I think is sort of important. Someone asks, ask Chris who her favorite writer is and why it's Jonathan Stokes.
Is that a joke saying?
I think so.
do love Doug. He's great.
Yeah.
He's a lovely human being. I don't know if I have a favorite writer. Like, that's such a big topic. But it'll be Stokes. Yeah, Stokes.
Yeah, we'll just leave it at Stokes. Yeah,
We'll leave it at Stokes.
That's the right answer. So, as a lit rep, what's the best part of your job, and then what is also probably the most challenging part of your job?
Yeah, the most challenging part of my job is getting people to read, because there's so many scripts that I know that kids have to read. Like, I was on that side, and I totally get it. I understand. They have a finite amount of time, and they want to say yes. They want to say yes, I'll read this. Yes, I'll make this. They just can't always. So that's probably the hardest part of my job. The best part of my job is when I have a great script from a client who I love, and I get to pick it out, and I just get to shout from the mountaintops, you have to read this. It's wonderful. It's amazing. You have to read it. And then getting those responses back. Like, I'm taking that. I have a pitch out right now, and I hardly ever take out pitches because they're just so hard to do. It has to be high concept. It has to be based on IP. It has to be, the writing has to be great in sample, and the writer has to be a good pitcher, which is a totally different thing. Like, writers are used to either being in a room or with other writers pitching and figuring out the TV show, or they're used to being in their room by themselves. Like, it's two different things. So it's just so hard to do a pitch. And I was hesitant to take it out, but the writer's amazing. I'm like, where did you come from? The writing's amazing. There's a book it's based on. There's a showrunner attached, and it's the best pitch I've literally ever heard. And I've heard a lot of pitches. And that's how I call executives, and I send an email, and I'm like, hi, I have a pitch for you. A pitch? Yes, a pitch. I'm actually giving you a pitch. I never do this. You have to hear it. It's the best thing ever. And everybody who's heard it has agreed. So I'm like, sweet, right. I haven't sold it yet, but that's okay. Because it's also a period piece with a closeted male lead, 1940s Chicago. There's a music element, there's a nightclub element. Like, it's just all the things that make everything so difficult and so expensive to do. But I'm like, nope, it's the best pitch I've ever heard. I'm taking it out. I'm finding the buyer for it. I'm finding a home. That's my favorite thing. Is just finding a great project or a great script that I'm just like, I know this is amazing. I cannot wait for everybody to read it. And then my client gets to have all these great meetings, and hopefully it gets made someday. So that's my favorite part.
No, and that's great to hear, because so often agents and managers, representatives are looked at as just salespeople in a very traditional sense. If you get a project, you sell it, you make money, and you move on to the next one. It's refreshing to see reps who are passionate about something, about a client's work, about a script, about a project, whatever. And whether it sells or not, your passion level doesn't change for what it is inherently. You may have to move on to the next one if it doesn't sell, based on market conditions or things out of your control, but it doesn't change your enthusiasm for the project or the writer, and I think that's pretty amazing. So,
it's really. And the second thing is when my client gets a job. I remember when my client Sarah Beckett, it's really hard to go from writer's assistant to staff writer. It's just a really hard jump to make, and she made it, and I was so excited. I was just so happy for her. We closed the deal. She started the room. I think it was Resident Alien. It's such a great show, and it turned out to be a great experience for her. And I was out to dinner with my husband, and I was like, Sarah got a job, blah, blah, blah. I'm so excited for her. And he's like, you get paid, right? And I was like, oh, right. Which is great. But it just was, that makes me sound so Pollyanna, but that's really what happened. So it's just, because my clients can do something I can't do. I wish I could. I wish I could write something. I wish I could direct something. Like, I can give you a great, sarcastic comment like that I can do. But to, write a scene that has meaning and heart or is thrilling or is mysterious or something, it's just, I can't do it. And I'm just so in awe of them that they can. So if I have a little part in their success, it makes me happy. I would rather be the person thanked than the person accepting the award.
No, that's awesome. Plus, as you had mentioned, it's not an easy jump. It sounds like, you become a writer's assistant, become a staff writer. But you know the battles in the trenches and how long it takes. So it's an accomplishment to get that done, to make that jumps on your part.
Yeah.
All the work you have to put in and all the work that the writer has to put in. So it's a huge achievement.
Yeah.
So that's amazing.
it's really like staffing is just crazy, and like there's 400 new shows, and like there's like 40 new shows every podcast season, which is like 400 jobs. That's not a lot.
Right.
It's really not.
Yeah. And then all the shows that get canceled, those writers are looking for work now too. So, I mean, it's definitely,
It's such a difficult job.
Yeah. This is a question that I think a lot of writers would love an answer to. Other than brilliant writing, which I'm sure most writers out there think at some point that writing is, how can a writer stand out to you in a very crowded field? Like, what impresses you in regards to a writer if you're already a fan of their work?
First of all, be a good human. Be nice to everybody, recycle, all that stuff. Definitely be a good human. I look for good writing or good directing first. Be a good human second. But also have a really distinct point of view. That was something Ali Sherman really taught me about. Is like, what's the point of view? What's the theme? All that stuff. But it's be loud and have tell a crazy story. Like I have a client, Harry, who has a script about a murderous killer sock puppet. So, which like, okay, I know, like he's a stop motion animator, and his wife is a stuffed animal designer. And so they have this like garage full of stuff. And one day he sent me and Ben, my colleague Benjamin, a picture of a Argyle sock with some teeth sewn to it. And he's like, "Is there something here?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So like that. And it's a great script, and like it's bonkers. But it's also about this woman who's is about the perils of fame and what does it mean to want to be famous. She starts doing act with it, and it's just loud but heartfelt and emotional, and it catches people's attention. So I mean, he's gotten I don't know how many general meetings off that script, and we haven't sold it yet, but he's gotten other jobs from it. So be loud, be specific, tell your story, know what your story is, which is really, really hard to do. And I like when people have a life and they go do stuff. They go sailing. They learn how to cook. They go to art galleries. They take in, I don't know, homeless people. I can maybe that. But yeah, have a loud, distinct voice. Have something to say, and be a good human.
No, that's good advice. You wouldn't think you'd have to say that, but in today's day and age, it's nice to emphasize that.
Yeah, go get your heart broken and write about it.
What are some things that writers should know before they submit a query or submit material to someone in the industry?
Well, they should have one solid script. Don't send 10. Don't even send 5. Maybe 2. Log lines. But make sure that you have one really solid script. And you'll probably have to write like 100, maybe not 100, but a lot of scripts before getting to that script. Don't send something that says, here's 10 scripts and 10 different genres. Because that's just telling me you're scattershot. You're just like trying to find something. You don't know what your voice is. Because writing is really hard. It's really, really hard. And yeah, you have to really know what your voice is. So yeah, definitely be as specific as possible and know the odds and don't take anything personally. Like if I don't write back or something, it's because I've gotten 30 other queries that day and then I have to deal with my client. So it's understand that nothing is ever personal.
What are some misconceptions that newer writers, that emerging writers have about what a lit manager can and can't do for them?
Well, probably, a manager doesn't give you a job. We're not headhunters, we're not agents, we're not lawyers. We are really there to give you the lay of the land, guide your career, figure out what that path is moving forward, figure out what your voice is, help you develop your ideas into scripts, whether it be series, feature, short film, what have you, and give you advice. And my most successful clients are not the ones who say, I really need a job. My most successful clients are the ones who just write all the time. So, gosh, I'm not sure what other misconceptions there might be out there. It's a really, really hard job. Things take a really long time. They just do. I hate it. I'm so impatient. I think patience is overrated, like sand, and I don't like it. But I know that that's how it goes. One of my most prolific clients, we've been working together for 3.5 years now, and we just started making money together like a couple months ago. So it takes a really long time, but if you're patient and you do the work, there are no overnight successes. There really aren't, unless you're someone who comes from a lot of money that can buy your way in. And there are many examples of that in Hollywood. Like, it's a definite thing for sure, but there are no overnight successes. It just doesn't happen. Just be patient, do the work, understand the odds, have a realistic view of how Hollywood works. And Hollywood's very conservative. It takes a long time for things to change. It takes a long time for anything to happen. I think of it like a cruise ship, like so fun and full of interesting people and entertainment and food and whatever. But it takes forever to turn. So just remember that there's no overnight success. Put in the time. Be patient. Be nice to everyone, because it's a very small town. It's a big world, but a very small town, and it's going to take time. It's just going to take time.
What should be in a query? How long or short should it be?
Short.
Because we get that a lot.
Yeah, it should be short. You can tell when, you don't need to compliment the person you're writing. We know that you're sending this out to 100 people. You don't have to say I followed your career and I love what you've done with your clients. You don't know what I know you're sending that to everybody. It's totally fine. Hey Chris, here's the thing. Logline comps, what it is like. It's in the vein of The Godfather meets Ocean's 11. Well, that would be interesting. Maybe a little bit about yourself to make me laugh, hopefully. I wish I could find, I might have the best query letter ever. I was from when I was an escape artist, and my colleague Lance Johnson got the same query letter, and I can't remember what it said, but it made me laugh. It was just short and funny, and it was a script called Freshly Popped by a writer, Megan Parsons, and it was about a girl, 18, so on the cusp, who worked at a movie theater, and she wanted to lose her virginity before going to college. And I remember that it was very succinct. It was the log line, and she just made me chuckle. And we both thought it was a great query letter, and we requested the script. It was great, and Megan was a lovely, and she probably still is a lovely human. And we sold the project to Overture. So I say be unique. That's so hard to do, but just short and sweet, and try to entertain me, try to grab my attention in some way. Yeah.
How many queries would you say you get on average in a week?
Per day?
Or a day or week, whatever, on average.
Maybe 10 a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's still quite a few to read through. Yeah.
Yes.
And what is sort of the protocol if somebody queries you with a log line, a script, doesn't get a response? At what point can they query you again with something different?
Something different. Whenever they have something different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I know some reps have said that they prefer a longer wait because there's no way you did something new in between, and so this is your second best script. But I mean, the log line could be different, and you may respond to a log line differently. And
honestly, I've been honest this whole time, but honestly, I'm not going to remember the name. I'm not, because I get 100 emails a day, and I'm not going to remember the person's name, so it's not going to matter.
Well, that's good.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, no. Okay, so I had a brief debate with someone on Twitter, a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to relay it to you. It wasn't. It was just something about representation and about getting read and about knowing when your material is good enough. And my position was that you, as a manager, are not there to guide, teach a writer to help them get their material to the point where it can be read by other industry individuals. I mean, to get to the point where it's ready to go out, yes, but to get to them saying, hey, this is my first script, is it professional enough to send out to people? Their take was, I wrote a script, how will I know it's good enough to go to industry people if a manager doesn't read it, like it, and tell me it's good enough to go to other people? So can you talk to us a little bit about like what level should a script, like how can a writer know a script is of the professional level to where you may actually consider it versus, I'm just sending you something, tell me if it's good enough or not, I'm sending it to you, read it, give me some feedback, let me know if my query's good enough, if my script's good enough, and then what we can do with it from there. Does that make sense?
Two things. Yeah, two things. Writers starting off, they should be reading a lot of scripts. There are plenty of them on the internet. You can get a blacklist if you need, there are plenty of great scripts around. They should be reading. So they should have an idea of what a great script is. I even know that it's a subjective thing, but there are some, Aaron's working, we know it's good. So you should be reading those scripts and hopefully comparing your scripts to other scripts. Maybe you find film school, maybe not. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's terrible. Anyway, so I come from a development background, so that's just how I manage. I'm used to going draft, notes, until it gets to the point where we can sell it or take it to a studio or whatever. So that's just how I do it. There are other managers who don't. They don't either have that background or they just don't manage that way. So that's just how I personally do it.
But is there a certain level of professionalism in terms of the writing that you would need before signing a client? Like, even if you felt the script was a little clunky or didn't accomplish everything you were expecting, you could see how it could be improved, or maybe you didn't like the specific genre, or you didn't like the specific whatever of that particular script. It didn't grab you tonight, but you knew it was good writing.
It's just something you hone after a while of reading thousands of scripts over your career, and you can just sort of tell that this person has it,
right,
this person doesn't. Usually it's a character thing. If I really am interested in what that main character is doing, if that character has an arc, has an internal struggle, an external struggle, if the script has a thesis it's arguing, if the script, there's just some sort of raw something that comes across, which it's unteachable, which is why it's unexplainable, which is why I'm not really helpful to answer. But for instance, a client of mine, Laura Pumpkin, she came to me from CAA last year, and she comes from the tech world and production world, and didn't go to film school, and probably read some scripts, but when I started reading, so I was like, whatever, this person comes with, whatever, I'll read it. And this came from an agent who I really liked. And I started reading it, and I thought, oh, whoa, this person is just fully formed as a writer. This is incredible. I have to turn everything off and pay attention to what the script is. And I think it's brilliant. I think she's a brilliant writer. She just happens to have it. So that can't happen. She knows how to tell a story. She's an avid reader, so that probably really helps. So there isn't really a level. There's there's a rawness, there's a unique voice to it. And then there's me having a conversation with that writer to see if they're open to notes, if they're open to changes, and what they can do with the notes I give them. So it's sort of an intangible thing, which is not a really helpful answer.
Well, I guess it comes down to a lot of newer writers, a lot of emerging writers fall into a trap where their script may or may not be ready for prime time in terms of the level of experience, maybe their first script or their second script, but they believe that it's good because they're still in that they don't know what they don't know, right? And so, but they burn reads, they send scripts that are wholly not ready to be read to reps, and you may or may not remember their name, but I know a number of managers who said that they, if something is bad, there's a chance that they could remember it and that writer and then just block them or move on. So how do we prevent writers from doing that?
I think have a writer's group. sure have a 4 or 5 other writers who you read their scripts and you take their notes and you take their advice. Hopefully that you can find a good group for that. And if there's a consensus of that group of those 5 people that this is good, then that can be really helpful. I think maybe submitting it to screenplay competitions can be good, but you also do want to submit it when you already know that it's good. So yeah, but it was really, really hard, and I was lucky that I had a person to write with, and that I was already at a company where my bosses would read it. So I really, really sympathize with writers because it's so hard, but you kind of just have to take that leap and just send it, and to know that this isn't your only script you're ever going to write.
Right.
Yes, be protective of them, but don't be precious with them.
Right.
Writers write. They write all the time. Nova writes a script every 6 months, and luckily they're all development somewhere. It's great. But just you're going to keep writing, and don't be as precious with it. And if something is really precious to you, if it's this is my story and this is really personal and it has to be done a specific way, then wait with that one. Put it in a drawer. Keep working on it, but don't send it out. If that is your one thing that you love, that no one else can write, no one else can do, don't take it out until you've taken out 5 other things and see how they do.
Right.
There's no rush.
It feels like there is, but yeah, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that when I worked at CIA was relayed to me by one of the actually agent trainees, although I'm sure they were suffering as an agent trainee, so they were telling themselves this. But it's not. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right?
It's definitely a marathon.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, it doesn't feel like it, and then you see other people selling things and getting made and winning awards, and you're like, that should be me. I'm 37. But there's no time.
And it's funny because it never changes, whether you're the assistant, the writer's assistant, trying to become a staff writer, or even just an emerging writer trying to become a writer's assistant, or whether you're a co-EP trying to make EP, or showrunner. It's everyone feels that pressure to why isn't it happening for me? When is it going to happen for me? The grind, and so it never ends. But
it never ends, ever. Well, we don't want it to, because if it ends, then it's going to end.
Right, or the industry has gone away.
Yeah, or this big zombie apocalypse is happening. Right. We're better off.
Right. So we've got a few questions here from the live chat here. Let's see here. Hillary Van Hoos says, Chris, I saw that you're on Virtual Pitch Fest. Do you want pitches on there to include a short bio of the writer, or only to answer the story-related questions you outlined?
A little bit, sure. Tell me something interesting about you. Tell me something unique about you. But again, keep it short, keep it succinct. I do really like it when writers answer the questions I have on Virtual Pitch Fest. The questions are, what's the thesis? Why make this now? Why does the audience have to go see it? Because, again, something from Alex Jarmark, you kind of need to know those kind of things. And if you answer them, then I know that you're paying attention to what I asked. And I know that you're paying attention to the industry and trends and where things are going. Don't ever write good trends, ever. Don't write to the market. Just don't. It's not a good idea. But know what's going on. Know what people are interested in, know what they're not, and know what's going on in the culture, know what's going on in the world. Kind of got to pay attention to that. So if you answer those things, then then I know that you paid attention to what I've said, and I do pay attention to that. I take those virtual pitch fest things very seriously because I know they're paying for it, and it's hard. So yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me your whole life story, but you rescue dogs and you to eat orange rocky. I don't know.
Marcus Aurelius, wow, I really want to hear this pitch now. I guess the pitch you were talking about earlier. Another writer says, I'm a writer with 15 vetted screenplays. I've sent out 360 plus queries. I've worked with script consultant, and I'm in the second round of the macro blacklist incubator. Why can't I get a script request? LOL.
Oh no, was that personal? I hope I. Well, I'm wondering who's the vetting.
Yeah,
that's them.
I don't know. So what does that mean?
But, yeah, but the macro blacklist incubator.
Yeah.
That's legit. So should definitely. There's no rhyme or reason. There really isn't. I hate to say that. It sounds like people are lazy, but it's just not. For some reason,
It sounds
the
like
query isn't resonating.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it may not be the actual writing. It may actually be the log line or something in their query, or I don't know. But if the screenplay is moving along and it's people like the script itself, maybe it's something within the query of the log line.
Yeah, it probably is. Yeah. Maybe the query's too long. Maybe it doesn't grab some attention. Because the writing, it sounds like the writing is there. So, find me, send me your log lines, and I'll critique your query.
Marcus Aurelius says, "Hi, Chris. Thanks for doing the Q&A. Can you please talk about the importance of having a high concept and maybe some examples of what does and doesn't qualify? I keep getting different definitions."
Okay. Well, high concept is something that you can sell inside of like a sentence or two. So, speed is just Die Hard on bus, which doesn't really help because like you're against Die Hard, so it's kind of cheating. But it's still like that's the high concept. So, I'm trying to think of a high concept. I mean, you got me on the spot. So yeah, it's something that high concept is something you can put on a poster and sell. Like everybody knows exactly what it is right away. Something that I guess IP could be considered high concept, like it's based off of this book. If everybody knows what the book is, if it's a bestseller like Da Vinci Code or something, that could be considered high concept, I guess. I wonder what the other definitions that they're getting are, but what's a good high concept of? See, now I'm in the spot, and now I can't look at one, and now I'm sound like I'm incompetent.
No.
Yeah. Because like The Godfather is not high concept, but it's based on a best-selling book, and you kind of get an idea of what it is. Yeah. I don't know if that's what's helpful at all. Probably.
I mean, something that falls along the lines of like Independence Day, where aliens attack the Earth and they defend the Earth and they win on Independence Day. It's like something that you kind of know what you're getting right off the bat.
Exactly. It's in the title. It's something that you can see the visual of. It's
right. We're trying to explain something like what is the Bridges of Madison County versus what is again Die Hard. Explaining a guy, a cop who goes to an office party, gets trapped in the building when they take it hostage. Right.
Yeah. And he has to rescue everybody.
And he has to rescue everybody.
Ex-wife.
Right.
Yeah. But Bridges of Madison County is about two older people falling in love in the town in the summer, and you're like, that sounds cool. Or even like it's Forrest Gump, even high concept. A man, it's really not. I mean, it's based on a book, but it's not what a lot of people read. But it's not a high concept thing. You follow a man as he goes through the second half of American history, meeting notable figures.
Right. I think right. That's why someone like Zemeckis had to get that made, as opposed to get in a picture kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where you're like, what's that?
Yeah, high concept is this means that Devil Wears Prada meets Friday Night Lights.
Right.
That would be weird, but that's all along the lines of what high concept is.
And if you can make it have a twist, that's even better.
Yes.
Or not necessarily like a surprise, but you take something familiar but make it different. That's what everyone, that's the golden goose. If you can take something that's very, very familiar but make it completely unique with your spin on it, that's the golden goose.
Yeah, I have a client that has a script called Symbiosis that is retelling the Frankenstein myth in a lesbian rom-com with a flesh-eating bacteria.
Wow.
So that's kind of high concept because you're like, interesting.
Right.
But the Frankenstein element, you kind of like know that stuff. But anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's see here. Farzam says, question for Chris, does it count as a lack of focus if a writer is interested in both features and TV? Different strategies to break a writer who wants to be staffed on TV versus who wants to create a show?
No, it doesn't break focus. I think in the past it was, do you write features or do you write TV? now that line is so blurred. And I think that's a good thing, actually, because I think we'll always have, distinct features and distinct TV. There'll be, the 2-hour thing you go to the movie theater for and the thing that you watch for 3 or 4 years on your TV. But I think we're finally learning that storytelling doesn't have to conform to any sort of minutes structure. And I actually really, I love, movies are my first love. I just love them. But I really do love a great limited miniseries because you can get into those characters really interesting and you get to have them for just this amount of time. It's a long amount of time, but it's not too much time. So no, I don't think it's focused at all. I think it's great to have both of those skills because they are two very different mediums and you have to figure out. A movie is something that is close-ended and you want to get to the end of it. A TV series is like a pilot is something you don't want to end. And those are two very different ways to tell a story, but it's good to be able to do both if you can. If you can't, that's also fine. So it's like, like writer-directors, they're usually better at one thing than they are at the other, even though they're both good at both things. So, was there a second part to that question?
It was just different strategies to break a writer who wants to be staffed on TV versus someone who wants to create a show, although most writer staffed want to do both, right?
Both, yeah. The way to be a writer's assistant or to get staffed on a show is to be a writer's PA, be a writer's assistant, and get the bump up to it, or to be an expert in a different field and then become a consultant on a TV show and then get staffed. One of our clients at the company, not my client, but Cameron Jem's client, Barbara Curry, she was an assistant DA, I think, something in that area, and she started consulting on a TV series, I forget which one, and was writing her own scripts and sold some things to NBC, and now she's been able to get in that way.
Right.
There are doctors and lawyers who are able to get into through the side on that because it's really hard to get staffed on a series. And to create your own stuff, it's a little different. I think it's easier for writers to create a limited series or an event series than it is to create an ongoing series because a limited or event series is a contained story. It's 8 episodes and hopefully you have some IP and you get on a book and game something. And I think it could be a little bit easier to break in that way than the traditional series route. But I'm sure there's examples of me that being like the total opposite. So yeah, to get staffed on a show, start like meeting those writers, getting to know them. I know that's really difficult to do, but that's really how you get those jobs to be staffed on a show.
Now, side question, it's incredibly difficult to get staffed on a show. The odds are very, very high. The odds are very low for a newer writer to get staffed on a show if you don't have credits, if you don't have a lot of connections.
Yeah.
Right. But it's even harder to get a show made. Seasoned showrunners have a hard time getting a show picked up. And as a new staff writer or somebody who maybe even a story editor, it's oftentimes in the contracts where you cannot develop a show for the first season or two of a show. What would you recommend? Because everyone wants to make their own show. There's very few, I think, writers out there who, TV writers who don't have a pilot, don't want something developed of their own. But what would you advise for newer writers out there who want to create their own show versus getting staffed? Where should they put their energy knowing that, again, we have 24 hours in a day and there's only so much bandwidth we have? Should they focus on trying to sell my pilot, or should I try to spend my energy trying to get assistant jobs, trying to get staffed, trying to do that? Which is a better expenditure of most newer emerging writers' time and energy?
I think to get staffed on a show, to learn how that works, to learn the mechanics of the room, to refine your writing, to learn how to write with other people, to learn how to take notes and criticism, and then also to see how the production of the show actually gets made, because that's a whole different thing. And during COVID, and still now, there are less writers getting to be on set to actually produce their episode, which is unfortunate because then there's a bunch of writers right now who are not going to be able to run the show as much as they could have, pre-COVID. So, and producing is a different beast in itself. It's definitely different than writing. And there are other producers on the project. There's crew. involved with that. But to know, to see that process and to see it all the way through, even if you do sell your pilot, if you're a young writer and sell your pilot, you're still going to have a showrunner on top of you who like has been through that, who knows how to do, you know, the budgets and schedule and all of that. So the more experience you have on someone else's show where you're not in charge and it's not your name on the line, the better for you. Like, get that experience and know what that is before thinking about, you know, selling your own pilot. Or even definitely want to sell your own pilot, like for sure. There's a client company, not my client Marcus's client, JJ Bailey, who he sold I think like 3 pilots, and he's a brand new writer, never staffed in a room before, and he still has, you know, people above him, and you know, he's amazing and he's a great pitcher, and good luck to him. And also a lovely human, so he's right. But yeah, learn on someone else's show for sure. Put your energy into that, but keep developing your own projects all the time. You can only when you can't develop it, you can't develop with another company, another producer, but you can still keep writing projects all the time. Yeah, so definitely keep writing, but yeah, learn on someone else's stuff. Learn on somebody else's money.
And also staffing, I think, gives you the opportunity to get fans, more and more fans. And I don't mean fans like out in the public on Twitter. I mean within the industry, with other writers, executives, producers, to get to know your writing, so that when you are able to develop your own story, you have that pilot that's ready to go. You have people who are willing to learn, willing to read it, and willing to support you because they're fans of your work already.
Absolutely. I have a client, Robert Doty, who's on All American, I think, season 4. He's been on since season 1, and he's learned so much, and he's and great writer, and he's learned so much on set, so much from, I think, 2 showrunners now, and he's, you know, 3rd or 4th in the room, and has learned, and so I know when he has his own project that he's writing right now, when we take it out, it has a good chance of selling because it's going to be a really great script. But also, he has the experience behind him that a studio or a network they're going to say, oh, right, he did all of this on All American, learned all these things, he's at this level now. Now we can sell this pilot.
Let's see here. Fun guy 345 says, do you think it's a bad idea for people to post log lines on Twitter?
Who's going to read them? Like,
I don't know if they're saying, is it bad? In other words, people won't read it, like people that he wants to read it, or if it's bad because it might be stolen. I'm not sure exactly what.
I think the odds of something getting stolen, I know that's like a thing writers are afraid of, that, you know, someone's going to steal my idea. No one's going to steal your idea. No one's stealing your idea. Someone might have a similar idea, but you know, the idea is not protected. The execution of that idea is protected, and there's no way that somebody's going to write the exact same project that you did, even if you have the same idea, same logline, same, you know, book, even. So this old adage that Hollywood's going to steal my idea, no, it's not. It's really, there are too many ideas out there for people to steal. Like, it's that you came up with this genius idea that people want. Like, sorry, no, not going to happen. But I mean, if you have the fan base of executives who are following you on Twitter, if you put your logline out there and someone likes it, maybe even like putting it out into the ether, letting the universe do its thing. So no, I do not think it's a stupid idea. I'm curious. Just reading.
Yeah. Let's see. The same writer who mentioned the 15-minute scripts, they're just identified as Google channel, so we'll just anonymous writer. Says, I think too many reps treat an unrepresented writer like they're an amateur writer. I can't even get a rep to read anything I've written, and I've got 10 scripts getting great coverage. I don't know where the coverage is coming from, I guess.
Maybe from Blacklist? Or maybe from the studio? Maybe. You just haven't found the right person.
Yeah.
Finding a rep who you like, whose taste you agree with,
right.
It's rare. It's like dating. It's, you know, how long did it take to find your girlfriend or boyfriend or husband, wife, what have you? It probably, you know, takes kissing 100 frogs before you get the right one.
Right.
So you just haven't found the right one yet. Just keep going. Send it to me. I will read it. I promise. I will read it.
Ron Hatcher says, what would you say to a 36-year-old baby writer suffering from an acute case of imposter syndrome?
Oh, don't call yourself a baby writer, because you're not. You're a new writer. That's exciting. New is exciting. New, green, what have you.
Everyone likes new cars.
Everybody likes, yes, new cars. That's fun.
Yeah.
But so you're not a baby writer. You're a new writer, and we're trying to not say baby writer anymore because it infantilizes people, and we don't need to do that. You're 36. Imposter syndrome. Who does not have imposter syndrome? I do. Most people I know do. It's so interesting that like Hollywood people think that they're slick and I'm confident. And I don't know what else. And everybody in Hollywood has anxiety. Every single person, except for like Matthew McConaughey and Stone Half Time, which is totally fine for your thing. But everybody in this town has anxiety. Every single person that I've ever met. Except maybe Mikhail. He's very calm. But anyway, so just know that you're not alone, which is significant, I think. So many people have that, and sort of like harness. If you can harness it in some way, I do my imposter syndrome. I'm slowly growing out of it. You would think by this age I would like you. I'm like hearing my resume. I was like, that sounds cool. I worked with some really great people on really cool projects. You would think that I'd be more confident. I'm just sort of growing out of it, and I don't know, like get healthy if you're not, exercise, get outside, do some yoga, do some meditation, be around people who are positive and not energy vampires, for sure. Take time for yourself, be quiet, figure out if you're an introvert or an extrovert. Really figure out like who you are and why, make sure that you like yourself, which I struggle with all the time. And see if you can harness it in some capacity. Like I think I use my imposter syndrome, or it's just part of my hustle. I have to get up. I have to do this. I have to send these projects out. I have to make sure I meet 3 new people a week. I just kind of use that anxiety, that imposter feeling to keep having to prove myself, which I don't really have to do, but I do. And that productivity makes me happy. You can harness it somehow. Yeah. I think I harnessed my anxiety when I was trying out for a game show. I was watching, my mother-in-law used to come over and watch Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And one day they had me, and I was answering all the questions. And she's like, you should go on the show. I'm like, I should go on this show. And so I auditioned for it. And like, I don't like being on camera. It's not I like being behind the camera. Like, that's my jam. But I was so nervous that they were filming me, and like I took the test and I passed that, and they had to do this one-on-one interview, and I was really nervous, and then I had to do an on-camera interview, and I'm like, oh, I hate being on camera, and I was just nervous, and I was just used that nervous energy, and I was bouncing around the room, and I was making jokes because I was uncomfortable, and that's what I do, and it turned out like that's what they were looking for to be on the show. So hopefully you can, and then I went on the show and made money. It was super cool. Super nervous.
Oh, you were on the show? That's awesome.
Yeah, I was on the show. It was like 5 or 6 years ago, I think. I can't remember. And it was Terry Crews was the host, and I won some money. And then I actually lost on a question that was in the answer was in a movie that I had never seen, and I'd always wanted to see it, and I had never seen it, and so I had to step away. But yeah, so like if you could figure out how to harness that feeling, that anxiety about being, and by the way, you probably are good enough. You're good enough. Like as a human being, you're already good enough. And then as somebody who's trying to do this, as someone who's 36, you've probably already had a career, or you have a career and you're trying to find a second one and trying to make that jump. Like that's admirable. I remember when my dad was moving from insurance to becoming a teacher, and he was 50 and going back to college, and he was my hero because who does that? So you're already trying something new, and you're writing into a stranger on a podcast. So like you're already taking a little baby step forward and getting out of your comfort zone, I would think. So know that you're not alone, and so many other people have that. Oh my goodness! And you're already taking the steps. So just harness that anxiety as much as you can for a positive reaction.
We're down to the 10 tanks.
Let's see here. Rodney92 says, Chris, I sent you a log line a month ago, but I got no response. I think it's a truly different idea. Can I send you a new, better log line? I think you'll love this idea. I love Rodney's sales pitch. There you go. All right, you got the green light, Rodney. Go for it.
Okay.
Let's see here. Brooks Reynolds, when considering a writer-director that is established as a commercial director, is their work in that space relevant to you?
Yes.
Yes.
And very much so. Yes. I mean, because it's so hard. That business is so hard. So competitive. There's so much money in it. There's some people trying to do it. But if you're actually successful at being a commercial it's really hard to tell a story inside of 2 hours, 1 hour. It's really, really hard to tell a story inside of 5 minutes or 30 seconds. So if you can do that, great. Plus, if you're successful at that and you have a bunch of commercials in your canon, then I know you've been on a bunch of sets. And probably if you directed those, then I know you've probably been on a bunch of other sets that you didn't get to direct, so you know those positions as well. So like being, there's a reason that Fincher and Michael Bay and all those guys in the 90s, why they got to be so successful, because if you're on a set a lot and you're making something great, but B, like you're experimenting and you're learning on all of those sets of what works, what doesn't. You're having crew members who you can work with, who you can bring along with you on the ride. So all of that experience is really, really good. And then I know that you can, if you're successful, and hopefully a good human, I know that you know how to work with a bunch of different people, because that's also really hard.
Right. And they've been vetted in some way because they're working in a professional environment, ad agencies and production companies, whatever.
For sure.
Rocky92 adds, I'm 62. Am I dreaming to think I can sell something?
No, what dream? Hopefully you are dreaming, because dream big. But no, who was the guy who wrote King's Speech? He was like 80. So, no.
Who was the writer of Nebraska? I think they were also in their 60s or 70s, weren't they?
That was, what do you call it? What's his name? We did about Schmidt. But
yeah, it was directed by Alexander Payne, but Bob Nelson. Bob Nelson, I think, was in his 60s, I want to say, I think. Don't quote me on that. When he got Nebraska written. So, no, it's definitely possible.
Absolutely.
Let's see here. Todd Klinger asks, what genres are you most interested in working with? Any you just don't like? Slashers?
Well, I say that, but like Scream is kind of a slasher movie, but it's just so smart. So, I mean, I don't really like the hospitals and stuff, but I don't think that people are making those as much anymore. There isn't really a genre that I don't like. I like left of center things, so that could be probably any genre. But I like a good Western.
I know Todd's follow-up is going to be, do you have an aversion to road trip movies?
No, not at all. As long as you have a cool story, like, don't try to retell Thelma and Louise. But yeah, definitely road trips are they're fun. I love it.
There you go, Todd. Clint Williams, do managers browse the Blacklist website and Coverfly Red List and other sources looking for new writers, or are you too busy with scripts from other sources? Thanks.
Too busy. That's just me. Too busy.
Yeah.
Are there any women asking questions in this thing? Where are the ladies? Come on, ladies.
I don't know. Let's see here. Marlon's Way. How should disabled writers approach a career if they can work regularly but not as quickly as a non-disabled writer?
Oh my. I guess the same way as a non-disabled writer would do. I'm curious the disability.
Yeah, I don't know. And even writers work at different speeds. Some, non-disabled, some are faster, some are slower. I mean, it's all about, what you produce as a result if you can meet deadlines.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't know. Chasing Epiphanies. I don't know if Chasing Epiphanies is a male or female. High concept usually...
non-binary.
Yeah, or non-binary. High concept usually can be described in a question. I like that. Jurassic Park. What if we could bring back the dinosaurs? I like that. Jack Firestone. High concept pre-sold to an audience. That's also true. Lucas Kendall. Do you watch short films looking for writer-directors like, say, mine? I guess. Were you looking at
Yes, I do. I do look at short films. A couple of my clients write short films. I just watched one last night from my client Taylor Bakken, who works for Patty Jenkins. And Patty Jenkins, and it's brilliant. And I just loved it. I remember I watched Ben Bryan has this great short film. I probably find online somewhere. I forget what it's called. But yeah, definitely. Short films are really hard to make. And yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, let's see here. Oh, the anonymous writer. Sorry, my name is Simba Dibinga. Did I pronounce your name right, Simba? I keep forgetting I'm not signed in. Oh, there you go. So now we've got a name to a face.
My job high school was named Simba. I love the one.
Yeah. Chasing Epiphanies, my advice for imposter syndrome, doubt your writing but not yourself. Ooh, I like that too. The writing can be polished to infinity, but your ideas are just you expressing yourself. No, I like that. You doubt your writing but not yourself. I think that's a great separation there, because I worry a little bit sometimes when there isn't a little bit of imposter syndrome, because of the fact that you wonder if they're going to be critical enough of their work, if they believe that they're already should be a showrunner and they've never sold or got anything made or been hired yet. Right, but again, doubt your writing but not yourself. I love that. That's good.
Yeah, because your writing does not define you.
Right.
And which I know it's a very hard thing to accept, and I struggled with that in my career early on. I really defined a lot of myself by my job, and it's not a good idea to do that, I don't think, because it's not you. There's so much more to you than just writing.
Yeah, and your writing evolves, it changes, it grows. Even individual scripts change and get better over time and things like that. But that doesn't mean if something hasn't sold right away or your latest project doesn't go anywhere that you're not still a great writer.
Exactly.
And you will get better every writer.
Yes, writing is rewriting.
Yeah. Jesus. Ron Hatcher, thank you so much. This means a lot. I'll definitely practice harnessing nervous energy. That's good. I think we all have that. I mean, again, I've heard stories from showrunners all the way down to writers. Just everyone has some sort of most people, I should say, 99% of them have moments of imposter syndrome. Again, but I Chasing Epiphanies line of doubt your writing, not yourself, I think is great.
Yeah, good creatives are like that. Like there isn't. It's so nebulous, our industry and our business and what we do, and there aren't rules. It's not like a corporate board where you're like, oh, I'm this. It's just not the same kind of thing.
Let's see. D. Killa says, are there any classes that you recommend for a writer that has been writing for over 5 years to get to a professional level to achieve representation and or a possible option?
No. Sorry. Classes. I mean, no. I know like USC has, yes, I don't know USC. I know they have a great screenwriting program. UCLA has a great screenwriting program, but I don't know of anything in particular. I know there's this book, Save the Cat, and what's the other one? Robert McKee's book. I think those are probably good, but there's no paranormals. I love that movie adaptation when what's his name is playing Robert McKee. It's so good. Anyway, no, I can't. I wish I could recommend. Just keep reading really good scripts, which is also subjective. So there you go. But just keep reading as many scripts as you can. Keep watching as many movies as you can. Watch the movie first. Read the screenplay second. Make sure that it's the shooting script and not a transcript of what the movie is.
Right.
But like compare things to see like what works and what doesn't, and just keep writing, please.
Let's see here. D actually went on to say I took some UCLA writers courses, so that's good.
Okay.
Gina Ippolito says, all right, I'll ask a cue to lady represent. Thank you, Gina. What level of writer do you represent the most, are interested in repping the most? Asking as a mid-level who has heard we mainly want lowers and uppers.
Sometimes they do, because you get the uppers to run the room and you get the lowers because you could pay them less.
Right.
So I look for any level. I should probably be looking for like only upper levels or whatever, but I really look at the voice.
Yeah.
Because I look at the voice.
I have heard it is tougher for mid-levels, from a lot of mid-levels recently. Has that been the case for you as well? Have you seen it a little bit more difficult for mids to get jobs as opposed to uppers and lowers?
I've seen a lot of shows looking for a number 2 in the room. No, I haven't come across that, but maybe that's just me.
Yeah. I think it's because rooms are smaller, so they get a few uppers in and they don't have the budget, so they just get some lowers to fill in the ranks. And I think the mids are the first ones to go. So because
probably.
Sort of
Yeah. I think like the SE or the ESE was gone for a lot of shows in the past year.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry you're struggling. Keep writing, please.
Hillary Van Hoos. Oh, yeah, Hillary's asked a question before. Do most managers set up general meetings, or is that more of an agent thing?
I do. I definitely do. I think it's a big part of my job to make sure that I'm introducing my client to as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're not doing that, what are they doing?
Right. Let's see. Ron Hatcher, would developing an original graphic novel be a useful tool for selling a high-concept sci-fi thriller to a kindly manager such as yourself?
If you've already had it published, yes. But developing, I think, and Mikhail would answer this question much better than me, but from what I gather about graphic novels and comics, it's a really hard business to be in, and you have to put up some of your own money first, and it's really hard to get a bestseller. Like something like The Walking Dead is just such an anomaly, but sometimes if you can get it published and it is a bit of IP, some people will pay attention to that, but if you have the money to do it and the patience to do it, an artist who's going to do the art for it, the inker and the colorist and all that stuff, if you're already in that world, yeah, as a way to reverse engineer IP, I don't think it's the best use of your time. Right. As far as I know.
Yeah, I've spoken to Marcus about it before, and again, it comes down to if you can afford it and have the time and it's done incredibly well, it can be an effective sort of selling tool. But for most writers out there who either don't have the time or the money or the expertise, or you're just doing it to pump up an IP, it can be your energy and time and money is probably spent better elsewhere.
Agreed.
Yeah. Let's see here. Hillary Van, whose Trojans represent. Fight on. Chasing Epiphanies. Anything a writer should keep in mind if they jump between genres a lot? One moment I'm making dark horror and sci-fi, the next I'm making silly comedies and whimsical fantasies.
Oh, okay. So I would say to not do that. To sort of pick, which I hate saying because maybe you're great at both. Like I have a client, Jamie Nash, who's really great at like sci-fi thriller and at like Nickelodeon Movies of the Week. Psychological sci-fi thriller, and I'm like, but I kind of like that it's 180 from each other. So, I mean, I'm not sure if he's an anomaly himself, but anyway, I think that if you're a new writer starting off, then perhaps to stay in your one genre, but move in that genre. So, like, Nova, for example, writes comedy. She can write rom-com, she can write sci-fi rom-com, she can write sci-fi com. Like, she moves in that space. So, when someone's looking for a writer for something, and after I've helped establish her as a writer around town, people know who she is, they think, oh, I have a comedy, I need to know that. I have a sci-fi comedy, I need to know that. So that people think of you in that. And like I say that, and then Craig Mazin goes and writes The Hangover, and then writes Chernobyl.
Right.
But he also always writes for a character, and I haven't really studied his canon enough to know what his theme is, because on the one hand, I don't want to put anybody in a box. And write what you want to write. Write what turns you on. Like write whatever sparks and lights you up. Definitely write that, for sure. That's the creative writing side. Which is the side that's a little bit different, and you want to make sure that people are thinking the right way. And what are your goals? Is your goal to sell something, or is your goal to have a long career? So if you want to have a long career and establish yourself, start with one genre, move in that genre. So yeah, and I should say, not just genre, but I mean, genre or thesis of something, or theme. Like one of our clients, Marcus' client, Rosie Ross, writes muscular women. Writes really, I'm not sure the way to phrase it. So she writes, something like Barbarian, which is what period piece about it's female, what's the name? Very hard.
Oh.
But she's also writing the creation of Barbie story. But it's like she writes muscular women, if that makes sense. So like maybe that's what Craig Mazin does. He writes like characters who have a secret, who whatever. So as long as you have like something, I don't want to say that defines you because I like being so binary, but something where people think of you, where they're like, oh, that's that writer. He writes sci-fi rom-com. He writes cats who do whatever. Like as long as you have a distinction in your writing, you can write whatever genre you want. But my advice starting off is to pick a genre and really hone that.
Right. And I always sort of mention whenever it gets asked as well, would you rather be known as, like, if you're trying to hire someone to repair your plumbing, are you going to hire the best plumber you can find, or are you going to hire a handyman who can do the plumbing but can also repair a fence, or can also, repair the air conditioning, kind of? You want the best plumber. That's what your concern is. And I think there's a bias from executives and producers and things to thinks of writers who are pushing themselves as more than one thing, as jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing.
Yes.
And it may not be true.
Confusing.
Right, but that's sort of what the preconceived notion is, I think, of writers who try to tackle too many genres early on in their career.
For sure. And because, realistically, it's going to be one for them, one for you, or two for them, one for you. So, like, realistically, even if you sell something, it's rare to sell something, but you're probably going to get an assignment first before you sell something.
Right.
So remember that as well.
And in terms of Craig Mazin doing Chernobyl, The Hangover was a huge hit. So once you had things like that, you can hang your hat on. Then at that point, you can
go to something else.
Right. Let's see here. I am Lori Beth. Now we have women's representing. Do you have any advice for how to navigate around managers who refuse to send good scripts out for staffing if writer is over 40, but will send not great scripts if the writer is 25?
Ooh, get a new manager.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sounds good.
No, that doesn't. Age doesn't matter. Experience matters. Voice matters.
Yeah.
Quality matters.
And in fact, especially I've heard from multiple showrunners that we've spoken to that oftentimes, a writer, an older staff writer, if they have the right personality, meaning they're willing to learn and grow, and not thinking they're above that job already, are preferable because they have a wealth of experience and life's experience that someone who's in their early 20s doesn't have, right?
Yeah,
so
for sure. I mean, depending on what the show is.
Sure, yeah. If you're writing the OC or something like that, that may be a little different. Let's see here. Famous Motion Pictures. I'm a writer, director, VFX artist with a new feature in post and will have distribution. What can I do to best get the attention of a lit manager?
Oh, do you think you need one? Well, for one, yes. Like, do you think you need one? Because you seem to be pretty good. But if you really want one, it's the same. Do you have an agent too? I'm wondering. Probably. Maybe. And by the way, congratulations to have something in post and getting distribution, because that is an uphill battle, my friend. So, same process. Query letters. Who do you know? I mean, ask. I wonder if this person wrote and directed the movie that's coming out. Wrote or directed and directed. Ask, and if they didn't, ask that person. Ask the writer or the director for who's their representation. Ask the executive on the team, who's your producer. Who do you know who you think would work well with me, and start that way. Get recommendations from people.
I've heard from other managers what I've asked,
Stumble problem.
but I want to get your take on it. If you get a referral from somebody that you don't know personally, but that is someone else in the industry, for example, if this writer, director, VFX artist, I don't know which role they had or all of the roles on this feature, had someone from that distribution company, that production company, that streamer, I don't know where it's getting distribution, that studio, wherever it happens to be, an executive from one of those places, or the producer of the film, who you may have, you've heard of projects they've worked on, but you may not know that producer. If they were to call you or email you and give a referral, is that something you would take seriously, even though it's not someone you know? Yeah.
For sure. If you take the time to find me and can get my number or my email address or what have you, then absolutely.
So then that writer director should definitely contact the producer of that film or the executives of the companies or whatever, and have them reach out to you on their behalf. Right. Perfect. Let's see here. Neil Schneider, in terms of queries and reading scripts of potential clients, are you more interested in a script you can take to market or a really great writing sample? I guess if you had to pick one or the other.
Pick one or the other. I mean, probably the great sample because it's just so hard to sell things. It's just really, really hard that I'd rather have something that, again, marathon, not a sprint.
Right. And I've heard of a lot of managers saying that they signed a client based on a writing sample, and that sample never gets made, but yet they get a lot of work from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They do. And I also, I don't know, because I don't know what time it is, but I do want to say to writers to try to get your own stuff made. So be on as many sets as you can, whether you're the writer or you're the PA or the crafty or whatever, and try to make your own stuff. Try to make your own short films, make your own music videos. You have an iPhone, you can't read, go make something.
Right.
Yes, it's really hard, but go do it. That way you have something visual because we like the shiny things. So please do that.
Yeah.
Definitely. Learn 3-point lighting, learn all that stuff, for sure.
Yeah, and
you're not just a writer, you're a filmmaker.
And nowadays, back when I went to film school, you shoot it in Super 8, or the video quality wasn't great, but now it's like you have no excuse. You can shoot it in high def 4K on your own phone and edit it on this phone. It may not be easy, but you can do it, right?
You can do it, and even if it doesn't look great, even if it doesn't look great, as long as you're telling the story, as long as you're getting an interesting performance out of your actor, it doesn't have to look like Dunkirk. It can look washed out video, whatever. Or take that and use it. If it's gonna look like 80s video, then do something fun with that, subvert that genre, to be as creative as you can. It doesn't have to look like anything.
I always refer people when they talk about I don't have the budget to do this or that to swingers. If you look at swingers, it's not amazing. It's not beautiful to look at. Some of the shots are shaky or overblown. Some of the shots at night, like when they're driving to Vegas, it's literally a black scene with 2 headlights. They had no lights out there. It was dark, and then they had one probably Kino flow at the bottom shining up at them, so you can see this little window where they're lit, and then 2 headlights, and that's it. It's terribly lit. But that's what they had. But yeah, it's great because you like the characters, you like the story, you feel for them. It's really about more than cinematography.
Bend power and steel to get it made.
Yeah.
You can do it. Not having a budget is no reason. I don't think.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say that because that's a very white lady privileged thing to say because people have to pay rent and kids and whatnot.
Oh, sure.
But so that caveat, but make your own stuff as much as you can.
Right. Let's see here. What about tone? I've heard elsewhere that lighter projects are selling, but I tend to work a bit darker. Are we wholly beholden to the whims of the market?
Yes and no. So, lighter things are definitely selling because that's what we think the audience wants to see right now. However, if it's good, it's good. If it's good, hopefully it will sell. Yes, it's difficult for it to sell. Maybe not. No, I didn't want to say that. But maybe not a serial killer thing right now. Don't write anything about a pandemic. I hate to say that because it relates you up. But however, and by the way, if you want to write that, write it, but just expect that it's probably not going to sell. Get it out of your system on paper. So never write
for not 10 years at least. Give it a few years.
Yeah, not for a while. We don't want to know about budgeting back then. But oh man, lighter stuff is selling, but darker stuff will sell too. After 9/11, there were plenty of things that were dark that sold, and in World War II, there were plenty of things that were dark that got sold. So yes, you are and you aren't, because then I say that, and then somebody will sell a next serial killer project, and it's only $300 billion in the box. So never write to the market. Write what you want to write. Be aware of what's going on, as it sounds like you are. But just write what you want to write, and just make it great.
Right. Yeah. And it's cyclical. Dark stuff will come back.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to take, all this stuff is selling now. It's going to take 3 years for it to come out, and it's going to be like that. It's going to take a really long time.
Right.
And that's 3 years is fast. That's the movie. The fastest movie I worked on was 3 years was Pursuit of Happiness, from the idea coming into distribution.
Wow.
I think it was 2 years.
Yeah. Trevor Olson, is the best chance to garner a lit manager to present them with a script that can sell immediately, solid concept, easy to make, cheap, or just a great ambitious script that would be costly to produce?
Second, the latter. For me, there are plenty of managers out there who will tell you write me something that's going to sell, write me the next Quiet Place, and that's just not my speed. It's just not my thing. So there are plenty of managers out there who will do that, and there are plenty of managers who are good at doing that and good at selling it. It's just not for me.
Rodney92, thanks for answering my questions, Chris. I find your enthusiasm inspiring. Oh wait, I missed one. Fun guy 345. Do specs matter to you? Would you read a spec? I'm assuming he's talking about spec pilot, right?
Maybe.
Or is he talking about spec episode, like for Fellowship kind of stuff?
Oh, I can't remember if Fellowships now are running.
I think there are a couple.
Shows or not. Yeah.
I think there are a couple that still want an existing show. So let's assume that they're talking about that. Would you read a spec of an existing show?
Yeah.
As their own writing, as their only writing sample?
Not their only. They should have their own original.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because most people aren't reading.
Yeah, but it is a skill to be able to write in somebody else's voice for sure. But I want to make sure that you have your own voice.
Yeah. No, and I know a number of showrunners who would, as the second request, would be the spec of an existing show so they can see if you can mimic, their show kind of thing.
Exactly.
Let's see here. Famous Motion Pictures, thank you both. To answer, I wrote and directed the feature, no agent. May I send you my trailer? There you go.
Sure.
Ron Hatcher, my final question, how are you?
Today, pretty good.
Today, pretty good. With everything that's going on, we'll take it.
Yeah, we'll take it. Like it's oh my god, it's so hot. But I mean, I get to work in Hollywood. I get to work with my friends. I get to do a lot of really great things. There's a lot of crazy shit happening in the world right now, and there's a lot of pain and suffering, and who knows what else is going to come tomorrow? Like, goodness. But I try to stay as positive as I can, at least when I'm on camera or talking to someone. But at least some things are starting to change. At least in the business and in society as a whole, we're reckoning things, which is really, really good and useful and helpful. But man, we have a long way to go.
Ivan White asks, which is easier to sell, a TV show or a movie spec?
Right now, a movie. Which is weird. Like 10 years ago, it was the total opposite. But yeah, it's easier to sell a movie.
Which is crazy because there's so many shows in development for all the streamers and everything, and we don't know if there's going to be movie theaters in 10 years at all. Yeah. So it's crazy.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, will they all be IMAX? Will they be either IMAX or like the little theater? I don't know.
Right. Interesting. Hillary said cameo appearances by cute cats are the best.
That's Diva. Yeah.
Dave, D-Killer, excuse me. Is there a specific site you cruise to find material? I meditate with Dandapani too.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Ivan White, do you use Inktip?
I used to. I haven't lately just because I've been busy. I rarely, I probably never peruse websites like Blacklist or something for scripts just because I have so many incoming that I don't really need to, and maybe I should. It's just so hard to tell from those websites like if something is good or not. I do like Virtual Pitch Fest because it's a little bit more interactive. So I like that one, but I think I guess they're all paid. Yeah. But yes, I have used them.
And then
they're great too. Those Inktip people, like they will reach out and Chris, do you need something? Because it's hard for me to, I don't remember. And I mean, so they're good. They're executives or whatever. They're really good at that. At least with that work.
There is one question we get a lot that we haven't touched base on. I haven't asked you. Writers outside of Los Angeles. Advice for those writers out there, and how imperative is it for writers to be in Los Angeles, if at all?
I used to say be here. Pandemic happened, and now I'm like, oh, different. But writers' rooms are coming back, and some showrunners definitely want you to be there in the room because there is a certain chemistry that happens when there's writers together. Feature writers are a little bit different because you can still write it at home and then send your script in, and you can do Zooms, or you can do the thing where you come to Hollywood for 2 weeks and get in a bunch of meetings and then go back. So features, I think, is a little bit easier. But when you're first starting out, if you're not in New York or LA or Atlanta, maybe in those hubs, Atlanta, Wilmington, North Carolina, New Orleans, Portland. If you're not in a place that has a community, a filmmaking community, I think it can be difficult as a new writer because there are certain things that you just network really well here to do. Like you go to the coffee or the party or whatever, and you do meet a lot of people. It's a little different now with COVID, but people are definitely coming back. So it's going to be a hybrid for a while. I do think. I don't know the vaccination rates, but I had a client who was in a mini room for a week, and they wanted to hire her for the run of the show, but she was in Canada and was not moving back, so she didn't get the job. But then there are some showrunners who are fine with that, so it's kind of hit or miss. If you're TV, I would say prepare to be here. Plus, if you're here in a filmmaking hub, then you're making stuff and you're meeting people. And as I said before, I want you to make your own stuff. So I wonder where the first, if your feature, it's a little bit easier, but if you're TV, it could be a little bit rougher.
So we are at the almost 90-minute mark. It's been great. Do you have any sort of final thoughts or advice for those newer non-baby writers out there?
Just keep doing it. Like keep writing. Write not all the time, but also get out and do other stuff and have other experiences. Because if you don't, how are you gonna figure out what's gonna write? But make your own stuff. Make your own short films. Work with people. Be a nice human. Be prepared for it to be a very long road. And just because it hasn't happened in 3 years or 5 years does not mean it's not going to happen. It just means maybe you rethink something or go in a different way or what have you. But also, if it hasn't worked, maybe there's a reason. And I'm not telling anybody to give up, but I also want people to be realistic. This is a really hard business. I'm sure a lot of people have said that, and it sounds like a cliche, but it's really, really hard. And it seems like, there's so much money around, and my thing's definitely going to sell, and what have you. And there is a lot of money and things do sell, but a lot of things don't. There's just a lot. It's just a really, really hard business. There are really great people here. Nothing is personal. It just isn't. And I know it can feel that way, but just be as realistic as possible and keep writing all the time.
Great advice. Actually, one last question dropped in. Ivan White. Last question. Does winning in top 5 place in a screenwriting competition impress you or help the sell?
It depends the competition. There's, I think, 6 or 7 that are recognizable that we know. There's Nichols, Tribeca, Sundance. There's a couple of other ones that I'm forgetting at the moment. So if it's those, yes. If it's something nowhere, not so much. There's few that it matters.
And you know which ones they are.
Yes, and I wish I could remember the other. We Screenplay, Austin Film Fest, something else with an S that I'm forgetting that my friend works on. I can't remember. But yeah, there's very few. Very few.
Yeah. Ron Hatcher, thank you. You all are great. Love this channel. Thank you, Ron. Trevor Olson, thank you both. Fantastic as always. I agree. You've been great. So great, Chris. I appreciate you coming on. So to everyone out there watching, thank you so much. As always, it's been great. We will catch you next Saturday for our Q&A with Stargate and Utopia Falls showrunner Joseph Malazzi. Same time, 11 a.m. Pacific. 2 p.m. Eastern, Saturday the 24th. And follow Chris on Twitter if you're not already. It's L.A. Chris Coggins. Is that correct?
Yeah, Law Huggins. Yeah, I'm more active.
Oh, Law. Excuse me. I thought it was L.A. as in Los Angeles. Law.
But yeah, I'm a little bit more active on Instagram. I like to promote my friend Matt Rosen. It's and I don't follow him yet. It's Rose Guy 21. It's a private account, so I have to tell him. I have to tell him what I do. So I think his taste is impeccable, and he's really super funny. And I don't know if I can swear on this podcast, but he gives no fucks. Yeah. And he calls people out, and he tells it like it is, but he's also super funny. He's just a cinephile in that like Tarantino way. Oh, wow. So follow him on Instagram. I find him entertaining. Rose Guy 21. And I'm going to text him right now to tell him that I'm asking people to follow him.
And that's on Instagram.
Instagram, yeah.
Okay.
Matt, where are you? Okay. I'm telling. Because I did it for, I was on this, I was on a panel for Butler University with a bunch of students who were graduating, and I said the same thing. I said, follow Matt Rosen, and he didn't know what it was. Like, they did it like right then, and he like rejected a bunch of people, so then I had to tell the professor they should reapply and do the thing. So like, wait like half an hour. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, so he'll accept you. Okay. Yeah.
Great. So yeah. So follow
Rose Guy 21.
Rose Guy 21 on Instagram and Chris Coggins on Instagram, on Twitter and Instagram, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Everywhere. So we'll have
everywhere.
So thank you all. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next Saturday. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to take a second to go put the soup on. Then I'll come back and put the oil on these last two tanks. And yeah, that should wrap us up. It took longer than expected. That's okay. 2.5. So weird. So dumb. Yeah, okay.
Okay, you have a strong chance of not messing up. Oh! That's huge!
I've been running this particular campaign for almost 2 years. There was a core group. My brother, John Castle, he and I actually co-wrote a Dragonman script when Dungeons and Dragons was at Warner Brothers. Kyle Noonan, he directed Fanboys, co-authored Art and Arcana, which is the visual history of the artwork of D&D, and then for the cookbook. Ryan Bernier. Ryan is a story designer for League of Legends. Ron Matthews, he's a CrossFit Master Champion. At 46 years old, he's the fittest man on earth over 45. I had previously recruited a Big Show from WWE Wrestling. He now became friends, and he was shooting a TV show in LA. He said, "Hey, bro, I'm going to be there for 2 months. Save me a seat, bro. Bring in my dice. Got to play." The group then was joined by Tom Morello on the Mount Rushmore of guitar players of all time. And then one day he said, "Hey, there's this guy in my kid's carpool that wants to play." I said, "Oh, man, I don't know. The group's getting kind of big. You know, we were on like 6 or 7. So the group's kind of getting big. I don't know." So who's your friend? He said, "Oh, his name's Dan. He co-created Game of Thrones." I was like, Dan Weiss? All right, yeah, he can play. Let's go. Vince Vaughn was a buddy of Tom's from Chicago.
I got introduced by Mr. Morello. He started giving me books and talking to me and kind of like, pick this out. He went on a trip and he kind of brought stuff with him and slowly got me interested.
Then while we were playing one night, Dan was on his phone. And, you know, I kind of get, you know, testy when people are on their phone while I'm DMing. So I kind of looked over, "Hey, man, what's up?" You know? And he said, "Oh, no, it's Dave. Dave wants to know how many different kinds of dragons." He said, "Well, I'm not going to tell you how to ask until you kill it." He started texting me again. He said, "Hey, man, Dave said he was going to divorce me as a creative partner. Can he come and play?" I said, "Sure, of course." So there were also some former players that kind of jumped in and out. James Gunn jumped in and out before he had to go away and shoot Suicide, to Taron Killam from SNL. There are comic book artists who have drawn all the characters. Juan Cabrera, who draws from Marvel, about 8 comics. He drew the characters. I started playing 5e originally with a producer at Warner Brothers, who was in charge of the Dungeons & Dragons property at the time. And he was like, "Hey, you know, we're playing again." I said, "Are you kidding me? Oh my God, that's amazing." So we were actually playing basic out of Red Knights originally. And then 5e came out like during that time. So we then, you know, went and bought all the 5e books and started figuring out how to play 5e. So that's how that started. But what happened was all of my other friends found out I was playing again. And, you know, I'm working out with my trainer. He's like, "You know that I was here."
I don't know. That's not it. I don't know. God. What the hell is this?
So Games Workshop are apparently paying really low wages to a lot of their staff, but they also just gave everyone a £5,000 bonus. Which one of those is true? Could it be both?
Let's talk about it. And yeah, I know, I've already put out 5 videos in July and a bonus live stream. I was kind of looking forward to having a couple of days off, chilling with the twins and playing RimWorld, but I just read a couple of things that I'm looking forward to having which one of those is true? Could it be both? Let's talk about it. And yeah, I know, I've already put out 5 videos in July and a bonus live stream. I was kind of looking forward to having a couple of days off, chilling with the twins and playing RimWorld, but I just read a couple of things that, to be honest, I think really need discussed. So if you don't know who I am, I'm lucky enough to be a full-time content creator on YouTube. Although making videos on this channel is my full-time job, the thing I make videos about is my hobby, and that hobby is mostly Warhammer, and painting and playing other Games Workshop models and board games. And to be honest, I've always felt pretty good about doing what I do. A lot of my videos are beginner-focused. I help people pluck up the courage to paint their first models, figure out how to play their first tabletop games, and join in with what I think is a really fun, rewarding hobby. I mean, I knew it wasn't perfect, no company is, but Games Workshop kind of always felt like a pretty cool company to support. A homegrown British success story, manufacturing in the UK, creators of fun sci-fi and fantasy settings that are getting more and more popular year after year. And then I spotted posts on the Warhammer 40k and Sigmarxism subreddits about a former member of Games Workshop staff. I won't go into all the gory details here, and obviously I'd always recommend taking claims by former employees of any company with a pinch of salt. But here's the gist. One of Games Workshop's rule writers was on £19,000 a year, and then when he was moved to the specialist games team as a game designer, he was given a raise to £20,000 a year. That's about €23,000 or 28,000 US dollars. And just for reference, he was part of the team that created rules for Warhammer Quest Silver Tower, Betrayal at Calth, and the current editions of Blood Bowl, Necromunda, and Adeptus Titanicus. He became a dad and was offered a job in another department at Games Workshop, but the specialist games manager offered him a big pay rise to stay in his current role when he came back from paternity leave. But that offer mysteriously vanished when he actually returned. He was told there was no budget for a raise, but unlimited budget for overtime outside of work hours. Exactly what any new dad wants to hear, I'm sure. Back to Reddit for a second. Interestingly, the post on the Warhammer 40k subreddit was removed by the moderators, but the one on Sigmarxism is still there. Now, I'm not going to speculate about censorship here, but you can probably draw your own conclusions. I do my very, very best to keep Midwinter Minis positive and hobby-focused, but sometimes something resonates with me so much, I have to get it off my chest. You see, I have a very similar experience, not with Games Workshop, but working in the music retail industry. In the same way that many hobbyists will think working at Games Workshop in any capacity is the ultimate dream job, aspiring musicians think the same way about working at a musical instrument store. I mean, I did. I've been making music and playing in bands since I was 14. When I lived in Edinburgh, I worked as a salesperson and then in the office doing marketing for a really highly respected, award-winning musical instrument retailer. I worked there full-time, 40 hours a week, and when I was on the shop floor, I was quite often the top-performing salesperson, and when I took charge of the marketing, our turnover hit record levels year after year. After almost 7 years there, my final salary was £18,000. That'd be about £20,000 now, adjusting for inflation. And team bonuses did occur, but they were pretty rare, to be honest, and only about £100 or £200 on good months. Keep in mind this was in Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland, which is always ranked in the top 5 most expensive city to live in the UK, far more expensive than Nottingham, which is where Games Workshop is based. Now, of course, I asked for more, but unlike when the Games Workshop rule writers boss said there was no budget for a raise, I actually believed my boss. Because we were a small team, we all knew what the situation was and how tight the money was. The music store was turning over about £5 million a year, but where Games Workshop's profits can be counted in the hundreds of millions, our music store's profits were counted in the thousands. Not tens of thousands, just thousands. And it was nothing to do with mismanagement. The owner himself was just as passionate as anyone who worked at the store, and he actually took home a salary that was very, very modest, probably about just double what the lowest paid full-time staff member earned. As a team, we were always aiming for innovation. We were reinvesting in growth and just trying to eke out an existence in one of the busiest and most competitive retail markets there is. Money was tight. I knew it. They knew it. So rather than just keep asking for a raise, reluctantly, even though I loved working there, I loved the work, I loved the people that I worked with, I handed in my notice and I found a new job in the music industry. Who would have thought that 5 years later I'd be a full-time hobby nerd on YouTube? How the hell did that happen? Anyway, I think we've got the same kind of situation here. People are willing to accept comparatively low salaries for what is actually pretty important, intense, specialist, and high-value work. Because literally,
If you don't want the job, there are hundreds, thousands of people that will happily replace you. I mean, you get to play with toys for a living. Sign me up. For reference, jobs that pay about £20,000 in the UK are stuff like call centre customer service operatives, supermarket floor staff, and retail assistants. And while I'm not downplaying the importance of those jobs, I've worked as 2 out of 3 of those, a rule writer for a game that tens of thousands of people will play is simply a different kind of job and requires a much more specialist set of skills, creativity, writing talent, and attention to detail. I'm not afraid to say it, that's a £30,000 a year job, at least. To be honest, for a company the size and financial shape of Games Workshop, I don't really understand why this is an issue in the first place. Your staff shouldn't just be paid enough. Maybe not even competitively, but generously. If you're a company owner, director, manager.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, sir.